Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Introduction to Grad Writing for International Students section. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Chen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the International Student Advisor at the International Center for Students. I'm joined by Swapnil, one of our wonderful student staffs who will be supporting with the chat and some background technology today. And our presenter, Kaveh, from the Center of Communications, the Writing Center. I will be facilitating the session today, and I can answer your questions about our programs in the chat. To start us off in a good way, we like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wistanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. This is a territory acknowledgement that we do at UVic as an act of reconciliation. We will hear this land acknowledgement over and over again in Canada to recognize the land we are currently on and honor the Indigenous peoples who have historic and present relationships to the land. You can learn more about the territory acknowledgement at UVic at the link. Swap, if you don't mind, can you put the link in the chat? This session, Introduction to Grad Writing, is being offered as part of our International Student Orientation Program. So between August 19th and August 23rd, the International Center for Students and campus partners offer online sessions to introduce you to services being offered to all students and provide opportunities to connect and learn about the resources available to you. From August 27th to September 1st, there will be many in-person programs for you to attend. We hope that you will join us. During this week, you will get a chance to meet with our team, get connected on campus, and make new friends at events such as beach socials, board game cafes, and hikes. And don't miss out our all-day International Student Welcome event on Thursday, August 29th. You can register for all the events using registration forms in our online schedule, which Swap will put in the chat for you now. If you haven't submitted your photo for your one card yet, please do so on the website being shared in the chat by Swap. You will need your one card to check in at the International Student Welcome event on Thursday, August 29th. So please submit your photo by August 23rd so that you can be processed in time. Your one card is your official UVic ID and on-campus debit card. It also gives you access to some great student discounts. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, you are welcome to put the questions in the chat. Swap and I will try to moderate the chat and then pose your questions to the presenter. Or if you feel comfortable and don't mind being recorded in the session, you can also raise your hand. We will let you unmute yourself. I will be staying in the background and happy to support. For now, I will hand it off to Kaveh to start the session.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. Good day to you, or wherever and whenever you are. My name is Kaveh Tagarobi. I am an EAL specialist. That's English as an additional language specialist. I also used to be an international student, and like many of you, I assume, who might not have English as a first language, it's been my status as well. But at the same time, I have worked at the Center for Academic Communication, which is the university's writing center, as a way of, just not educating, educating myself about the requirements of academic communication, particularly writing in a North American, Canadian context. And I hope that I can convey some of that experience to you. So the CAC, just very quickly, again, I want to mention, this is the UVic's Writing Center, and we offer one-on-one tutorials and workshops both online and in person to students. Obviously, it's a free service to all current UVic students, and we support you with primarily writing, but other forms of academic communication like reading, speaking, understanding academic expectations, and even things like time management and exam prep. So the link to our website is here on the screen, and our wonderful volunteers will also add them in the chat for you to learn more about the CAC. But for today, I thought, okay, what would be helpful for a group of international students like myself, like 10, 11 years ago when I started, and probably we can't really get too much into the details. I don't think it's useful for an introductory session, but I hope that we can learn about the typical expectations and some of the standards of academic writing and research. I understand and acknowledge that like we are all coming from different academic backgrounds, and it would be important to know the traditions and customs and standards that are practiced here at the University of Victoria. Also, some practical strategies I think would be included in today's session would be a good idea to help you write in a way that follows those expectations. So those are my two main goals, and also a little bit about how we can help, and in particular, the help that we can offer at the CAC. So the learning outcomes would be by the end of this session, I hope that you will be able to identify 5 main qualities of academic research, 5 main qualities of academic writing, because these two go hand in hand, in my view, and then 3 main stages of academic writing, and that's the practical side of strategies of how to maybe formulate your process following those expectations, those qualities, and as I said, a little bit about the CAC and how we can help. So to get us started, I thought it would be helpful to hear from you. As Amy mentioned, you are free to open your mic if you want to share some of your thoughts. I have a question here for all of us to think about. Or you can just put it in the chat. You can even like do annotations in Zoom and share your responses in whatever way that you feel comfortable, okay? And the question is, what defines academic research to you? I mean, you're all grad students, so I'm sure you all have your own knowledge and ideas. So I want to start based off of that. What qualities set it apart from any other types of searching, like a Google search, you know? And I think thinking about that is important because it can lead us to some qualities of the writing and the expectations in the writing area, okay? So the question is, what defines academic research for you? You can use adjectives or verbs to describe it, or just nouns that are qualities. And again, please feel free to open your mic, raise your hand, put it in the chat, use the annotations in Zoom in whatever way that you're comfortable. So I already see some answers here. Method, structure, and integrity. Definitely that's like, it's methodical, right? It can't just be like, okay, I just type some stuff up to see what I get. It has to be structured and it follows some sort of integrity. I think that refers to the idea of providing attribution to the people that we get the research from. Somebody added peer-reviewed journal articles. So the type of information that we get is obviously different as well. It's peer-reviewed. That's a very important point, that it's based on a consensus of knowledge of a community of scholars and researchers. Also, somebody put reliability of sources, which I think is kind of similar to the previous point. So academic research requires reliable sources. Again, that goes back to the idea of integrity, goes back to the strength of support that we can provide for our ideas and hypotheses. All right. I don't know if there's any more answers in the chat, but I really appreciate all of this. And now I would like to go sort of like back to some very basic things. So what is research in general? Let's define it for ourselves. For me, in broader sense, research is nothing but finding answers to questions. I know this is very basic, but you will know in a minute why this matters, why it is important for us to think about research as answering questions, and it will be related to writing. Okay, so please keep this in mind. In academia, which is a narrower sense, academic research refers to the systematic search, and somebody mentioned methods, so that's the systematic search for answers to specific and original questions. So that's a key point. The question we're asking, they need to be much more narrowed down, maybe original in the sense that they explore a new aspect of the topic in order to create new knowledge. And this comes from a textbook that we use at the CAC, the Academic Writing Essentials. And I think it's important to highlight some of the qualities here. So I highlighted specific, original questions. I also will add significant, because when we do research, especially as graduate students, we are asked to show why this matters, how it's going to impact the scholarly community. What is it going to add to what we already have? So significant, specific, original, and part of a bigger scholarly community and a conversation that is going on between those peers. All right, so let's list these things. And again, if you have any questions or any comments, if you think that this aligns with what you have been taught or what you have been thinking before or not, please share your thoughts and ideas freely as you see appropriate. Okay. At the CAC, when going back to these qualities, we can definitely help you in many different ways to learn more about the qualities of research. The first link that you see here, and I think it was shared in the chat, is our website. And also there's a Brightspace site that's called CAC Online. And we have lots of resources like PDFs and videos and little blog posts that talk about the different aspects of academic world and academic research. We also have customized sessions where you can meet someone in person and quickly ask questions about something that you want to learn about. Like basically you have a question and say, I want to learn about, and we call them learn about sessions. It could be about, anything. We're talking about writing today, but it could be critical reading, it could be listening, note-taking, presentations, and so on and so forth. And in order to request those sessions, you can email this email address at the bottom of the screen that you can see, and that's the CAC general email address. And the website itself has lots of resources. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly do a shout out for that, so we know where we can get information about research more. Obviously, there's also the library. We are located in library, and librarians are also great primary sources for getting information about research. Now, if we agree that academic research is methodical, structured, it answers specific and original questions that can show why they matter, the significance, and it's part of a bigger scholarly conversation, then based on that, what would the writing look like? That's my next question for you. What makes academic writing different than other types of writing in your mind, right? That's what we are gonna find out today. What is academic writing? Why it's not just writing? Because it is, and what would be some of the qualities that you will call for it, okay? I'll start monitoring the chat again, or in whatever way that you feel comfortable sharing your answers. I already see formal. Okay, that's correct. Citations, structure, accuracy. So I see a lot of like strategy, accuracy, citations. That's very good. I particularly would be interested in knowing how do you connect them to some of these qualities that we talked about. Um, you know, how does it like, okay, if the writing needs to be structured, why? Because it is part like you are responding to others. So it's mostly a they say, I say type of writing. It's not in isolation. You mentioned citations, and I think that's what you are referring to. We can't just write about our own ideas. It's not a personal piece, but a conversation. There's actually a book called They Say, I Say, which is a great resource for writing studies. And it's basically telling you that you have to learn to write in a way that you can weave together, you can bring together different voices of different people. So XYZ say that, and then on the other hand, we have ABC who say that. I will, try to bring them together. This is what I propose. So the type of voice that you have in writing is always sort of a narrating voice. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat that I missed. Somebody added, it has a discussion talking about other research. Very good, exactly. I think that's very similar to what I was saying. Needs to be written in a way where someone else can follow the steps you've taken in experimentation and reproduce the same results. Yes, and I would say that it depends on the discipline that you're writing, but definitely if your discipline is, requiring you to do, let's say, experimental work in the lab, you need to be very clear about your methodology and how you got your results. Referenced, accurate, valid, reviewed, great connection between different discussions. Again, that connection piece to me is connecting to this quality number 5 because it's connected. It has to show what I am saying is related to what other people have said. Also, a lot of people talk about accuracy, valid, something needs to be valid. To me, that goes back to 2, 3, 4, the qualities of being specific, being original and significant. It has to be important. It has to be correct. It has to be new to some degree. And it can't just be very general. It has to answer specific questions. I want to focus also, everyone, on that number 1, because I also highlighted that in red. I think that's really important. Answering questions. I can tell you that based on my experience working at the CAC, people coming in, students every year, the biggest and the most common issue with writing that I observe is that there's not a structured, or like there's not a focused question that they are trying to answer. Like there's a bunch of information and ideas that they have collected from different sources, or maybe their own analyses, or maybe some experiments that they've done, but it's not coming together. So people here in the chat have mentioned connection between different discussions, structuring. That I think that all comes down to number 1 here. See what I mean? Like if you don't have a central question, then everything else will not be really, structured and aligned. We need a unifying factor. And I think that's the research question at the heart of each piece of academic writing we do. So if the academic research requires to answer questions, then I would say that your writing needs to focus on a central thesis. A thesis statement, I'm sure you're all familiar with this idea. A thesis statement is the flip side of the research question, right? If you ask a question, the answer to that question is the thesis. They're basically sort of like the same thing. But if you don't have a thesis, then you don't have coherence, right? The same thing we talked about, the structure. And also the question we ask can't be just very big, okay, we can't just say, how can we find ways to battle climate change? In graduate level, that's too broad. Need to be specific. So again, the thesis that we write needs to answer a specific question, a narrowed question. It has to support it with evidence. I think that's what all of you mentioned. It has to be accurate, valid, cited. That's a key point. We are, again, not writing alone. It's not happening in a void. It's all based on proof that we bring from other sources, and we build our own arguments based on that. Most of the writing that you do will require you to always write a rationale for whatever. Like if you're writing a simple grad paper, they will ask you to write a section where you explain why this is important, probably in your introduction or somewhere in your conclusion. If you're writing a proposal, or later on, we'll work on your, maybe a thesis or a dissertation, you will see that is always a key component. A section about either they call it the motivation or the rationale or the objectives. And that goes back to that quality of being original, like one way or the other, and significant. You show that the work that you are doing is adding something that we didn't have before. You remember, creating new knowledge. And that thing matters. It is important. It can help us solve a problem or fill a gap. So those two qualities, the number 3 and 4, I think those correspond to that quality of the writing, which is always based on like proving yourself or selling your idea or showing to your reader why it's important. And finally, you can also think about that that piece of the scholarly conversation. It is a conversation amongst peers, amongst researchers, especially on the higher level. So when we write it, we probably always need to include a literature review. That's another key quality of grad writing that we do, and that's an overview of what others have said on the topic, right? So they always ask you to have a section where you summarize the they say part, what they say, others, they have said before you, that whatever the main findings or the consensus or the trends that has existed, the trends that have existed in your discipline for sometimes decades. All right, so 4 qualities we sort of try to deduce from the research qualities for writing. It has to focus on a central thesis. It should support it with document evidence. It should offer a rationale for the topic, and it usually includes a literature review. One thing I want to say about the literature review piece and other things is that if you want to learn more about these, maybe some of these are newer components for you of writing compared to what you were doing in undergraduate programs or other graduate programs we're doing. There are, you can see a list of our workshops. As I said, that's one thing we do in addition to one-on-one appointments. We offer workshops where students can come as groups and, like today, but a little bit more interactive. We will be working together to learn about different stuff. For example, on October 23rd, as you see here in the middle, there's a workshop on argumentation, how to create a strong thesis, which I talked about earlier today for a research paper. And I'm going to do that on October 23rd. But you can see that there's also a literature review lab on October 30th. That's specifically on literature reviews and how to write those. So what I'm saying is, if there are new things that you're hearing about today and you have questions about and you want to learn more about, please check out our workshops. They're happening every Wednesday, almost, I think, every Wednesday for the entirety of the term. Mostly, I think, from 3 to 4. It could be in Zoom or in person. You can see more details and a complete list of those workshops at the link that you can see at the bottom of the page, which I hope that can also be in the chat. It's an OAC website. It's a blog where you can find a list of all our workshops. Okay, thank you so much, Swap. I can see that you've added those in the chat. And so far, does anyone have any questions? Please let me know. Feel free to jump in at whatever point. But yeah, let's go back to our list. So focusing on a thesis, supporting it with document evidence. Also, it has to have some specific sections We talked about literature review, we talked about objectives and or rationale. There are other specific sections. I think everybody knows about introduction, body, and conclusion. That's very general, but maybe we know we can learn about more detailed ones, like the ones we talked about today. It really also depends on the discipline, what those sections are, right? So if you're in sciences, they will ask you to write a section on methodology because you're doing, some sort of an experiment in the lab. If you are in the humanities or social sciences or fine arts, maybe you don't have a methodology section, and instead you have maybe a theory section or a theoretical background section. So the sections really are discipline specific, and we can help with those. But whatever sections you have, it's important that the structure is clear in terms of separating those sections and then ordering them in a way that makes sense, and also connecting them together in a way that the reader can see how this all forms one single argument. And finally, the language that we use. I think one person mentioned formal in the beginning. Yes, it has to be formal, but I would say even more than that, we want the language, and now I'm talking about the sentence level. The sentences we write, if they are clear and concise, I think that's the best. We don't need to write very convoluted sentences or complex sentences or use a lot of difficult vocabulary. I say this because in a group of international students, this might be a surprise. I don't know if it is for you or not. You can share your thoughts in the chat, but it was for me and a lot of other international students I've met over the years. They always come into writing in the North American context thinking, oh, I need to write, in a way that is sort of like higher level, more academic. The sentences are a little bit more complex. And I always say, no, that's not the goal, especially in English academic writing in the context of a Canadian, or North American academia. The main goal is to be simple, clear, and concise, short. Okay, so we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Kaveh, sorry to interrupt you, but there are a couple questions about the workshops themselves. Just to confirm, are the workshops all online throughout the term?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. We aim to provide all workshops online for people who can't be here, but a number of the workshops will also be in person, so we'll have hybrid sessions. That is still being in the process of being decided because we need to do room bookings in the library. I personally would love to have at least some sessions that are in person, but even for those sessions, I will be broadcasting them online as well.
Yeah, and then just the one other question with the I guess right now the CSEs the link the workshops that they have are for the summer, but I presume that they will be updated in the fall term.
Exactly. Please check back in a few days. Our lovely manager Nancy here is working hard to get that list up. We're still in the summer term, but I think in the next few days you will see that the list is updated for fall workshops. And the other question was about the length of the workshops. Most of them are about an hour.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about structure. Again, we said that there are different sections we need to include in our writing. Depending on our discipline, it will be different if you're in physics compared to if you're in English literature, or if you're political science or education, right? So I'm not going to touch that today very much, but I'm going to talk about the basic structure, all right? The first of all, what is at the heart of the research paper or any sort of academic writing, if you remember? Obviously, you can just say that to yourself or say it in your head. See if you remember that the thesis was the key point, right? At the heart and the center of every piece of academic writing, there is a thesis, which is the answer to the research question. And one way or another, we are supporting that with a number of main supporting points. Like what I'm saying is this could be a generic structure for any academic paper, regardless of the discipline. There's always a thesis, a number of main supporting points, which are in turn supported by their own details. There could be, that's where you bring in the citations and the statistics and the quotes from other pieces or your own explanations, right? And that's the general overall structure. Of course, they are all connecting to the thesis. That's what brings them together. And that's how you decide if something should be cut out of your paper or if it can stay in, is whether it is directly supporting the thesis or not. They're also connected to each other, obviously, but that's mainly through their connection to the thesis. And then there's always an introduction, a conclusion, I would say probably in all disciplines, regardless of the other specific sections that you have, where those to me sit outside the main structure of any type of academic paper structure. Like introduction and conclusion are always there, and they are always kind of the same thing. The introduction provides background, contextual information, and then a short, very condensed version of your argument, which is the thesis statement. And the conclusion kind of does the same thing. It recaps the main points, repeats the thesis statement, maybe in a different way, and maybe ends in a way that you can show why this was important or how it will be impacting the larger context or what will be the next steps in research or something like that. We can talk about that in more detail, but I wanted to show you a general schema of what any academic paper or any piece of academic writing would be made up of. All right. Now I'm going to move on from some of these more abstract, discussions about what academic writing is and what the sections are, and talk a little bit more about how we do it. Okay. So again, one question for you to think about and maybe share your answers is, what major steps do you take to complete an academic writing project? That's a simple question. But a lot of people might not have thought about it. That's okay, what do I do? Like maybe you do everything together, like you do some research and you're writing, but can you tease them out, separate them into steps? And what happens first and what happens next? How much time do you spend on each step, by the way? Can you answer in percentages and say like, 20% of my time is dedicated to doing this step? I'll open the chat and see if there are answers there. Getting an idea about what to write about. Is that a part of the process? I would say it is. So one of the very early parts of the process. Somebody put reading research 30%. So like there's reading research step and then there's a writing step. There wasn't any percentage for the writing. Data collection and analysis. So that's probably coming first, and that takes majority of time. Interesting. And by the way, do you notice that a lot of the things we do for writing are not actually writing in the sense of typing words, like reading? And okay, I think somebody updated their answer. Planning, research, reading, that's 35% of this particular student's process, and it's not writing. The writing is the next 65%. Or somebody else says data collection and analysis takes the majority of the time, and that's not necessarily the writing part. Or maybe those are writing as well. Like writing includes things more than just writing sentences or drafting. If we want to give them general titles, what would those be? Somebody has planning here, writing. I would say those are two of the general steps that I also think of. Can you think of a third step that comes after that? Like you plan first and then you write, and then what would you do at the end? All right, step 1, decide question of research. Step 2, define method. Step 3, plan intervention. So the first 3 steps here that I see are kind of like all planning. 4, data collection step. And 5, analysis. 6, discussion. Now those are kind of more like also steps of like, those are like sections of the research paper, especially in sciences that you will do, right? Are those also steps of the process of producing the article for you? Like when you say like 6 discussion step, what does it include? Can we talk about writing terms? I have this here, the basic steps of academic writing to me, and that's based on most of the books and resources on academic writing are these three: planning, drafting, and revising. And I used to have these in a linear structure diagram before, because we usually say, okay, we start with planning first, and then we draft, and then we revise. But over the years, I've come to the understanding that they actually happen on many different levels, repeatedly and in a circular way. So now I have them in sort of a circular or iterative process where you can go back to planning after you've done a little bit of drafting, and you can revise while you are drafting, but then again you need to do more planning. But overall, I have some suggested times to work on each step, and you might find that interesting. According to a model, we call it the 40-20-40 model. We recommend that you dedicate 40% of your time to planning, and that can include things like what other people have mentioned: finding a topic, collecting data, stuff like that. And another 40% to revising and sort of like working on the actual writing part to make sure that it's up to the standards of academic writing. That's the majority of your time, 80%, and that leaves only 20% for drafting. So the idea is, if you can keep these processes as separate as possible from each other and give them sort of like different amounts of time, with the majority of the time sort of being focused on planning and revising, that should minimize the drafting part. And I will explain a little bit further to help you understand exactly what I mean. All right, so let's start with planning. For me, planning is the first step, even though, as I mentioned, it can happen throughout the process. It can include things like gathering information, taking notes, coming up with a narrowed down topic. That, I think, is very important, right? We need to work on the topic to make it specific. But remember, it has to be also original and significant. Create a research question that gives you the sort of the core of your paper, so you can have coherence, and then coming up with the answer to that question, which is your thesis, and then a number of main points to support that. Now, you probably can't do all of these things before you've written anything. I don't expect anyone to sort of like write their paper in their head before they have tried anything, but these are components that I suggest you try. Also, mind mapping can be a great way to see the connection between the different ideas that you have. Outlining is another step that you can include. So these are all suggested steps for planning the first 40%. Also, topic sentence outline is a very detailed outline where you have basically determined what each paragraph of your writing will be on. All right. So I would say that especially the last 6 are sort of in the category of generating idea and organizing idea. I would say, okay, I have a line here to separate the first 3 here, because those are generating of ideas, and the last 3 are organizing them by mind mapping, by outlining. The first 2 I didn't include because I think that's like very preliminary, where you have to do reading, gather information, talk to people, take your notes and stuff like that. That's like before you have anything. But these could all be parts of the planning process. And I would like to take a look at some of these things, because I mentioned mind mapping. I don't know if everybody or if anyone is familiar with that or have tried it in the past, but I would like to take a moment to show you. Let's take a look at a simple mind map and see how it is useful in organizing your paper. Once you have a thesis and the main supporting points, mapping them out in the way that I have shown in this picture, I think allows you to see the connections between your ideas better. So a lot of you mentioned connections are very important, the quality of the writing. So we need to have that thesis connected to the point. And if you see something is sort of like far away from the center of the argument, maybe it's something that you need to cut it out, or maybe you have to reorganize it in a different way. It's basically a way of ensuring that your paper is coherent, okay? Now, we also have outlines. Now, while mind maps present your idea spatially, an outline is a linear structure that shows the order in which what you want to present, like the introduction, the first point, the second. Obviously, this is a very simple outline here. It will be much more detailed, right? I have I think an example of a much more detailed one later. But the idea is more detailed outlines are like the more detailed, I think the better. It helps you prepare better for when you are drafting. You can use levels and indentations to show how one section is a part of a bigger section, like something is a subsection. You might see it in this example. That's a more detailed outline. It has the introduction, background, argument, few arguments, part 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's a conclusion. But you can see that under each of those points, they have subpoints using levels and indentations. And I think without an outline, it would be harder and will take longer to revise your paper. So my suggestion is to always include an outline at some point in your process. Now let's talk about drafting. If you have, and obviously I have to say I have gone through these things super fast because this is just an introductory welcoming session. We can talk about all of these things and any of these things in more detail if you want to reach out to the CAC later. But today I just want to give you sort of a basic overview. If that's, some of the strategies we talked about for planning is helpful to you, like you've done your mind maps and outlines. Now, drafting would be much easier. Like I said, will be probably just 20% of your time, especially for the first draft that you write. I think you basically are turning your outline into text. That should be the purpose of a first draft. You write a paragraph at a time. I think that's a key point in drafting, is to remember that the basic unit, the smallest building block of academic writing are paragraphs. So one idea per paragraph. And at this stage, I don't recommend that you second guess and revise and analyze what you're doing. Don't make many changes. Just your goal should be just to create a first draft. Some people just call it a zero draft because it's not a very good draft, okay? It should take very little of the total time that you spend working on your, here it says thesis, but any type of writing that you do. Try not to review what you have written until you have finished that first draft. If you have things that you think about, okay, I probably need to change this, or I need to add something to this, or maybe this is not very good, the sentence structure is not very good, leave some comments or highlight some stuff for yourself so that you can go back to them later. Sometimes I suggest using a strategy called free writing to avoid going back and revising yourself. I don't know if you know about free writing, but the idea is that you just write freely without worrying too much about spelling, grammar, structure. You just want to get your ideas down on paper. And sometimes you set a timer and you do it for a certain amount of time, like 20 minutes, and don't stop writing during that 20 minutes. So that first draft, I think it can be done. You can plan and then draft your work in its entirety, right? That's one way that people work, one style of the process where you can sort of plan everything and then write everything. Or you can plan and draft if you're doing a longer work, like if there are more pages in the work that you are writing, one section at a time. So plan your introduction, write your introduction. Go back and plan your methods part and write your methods part. That could be a way to do it. One tip that I always give students is maybe it's best to write the conclude or the introduction at the very end, even though that's the very first part of the writing. We don't really know much about the direction of the writing and what we are going to do before we have written the paper. So it will be hard to write the introduction first. But if you leave it to the end, you can, based on what you have produced for the body of the paper, write an introduction that matches and aligns with that. Think of the coherence and flow of your paragraphs as you draft. I think it's important, but don't worry too much about little things like grammar. You do your best, of course, to write in a way that, if you remember, I said clear and concise, simple, clear and concise, correct sentences, but don't spend too much time worrying about those things. That's my suggestion in part of the drafting process, because you're going to go back to that later for revising. Okay, let me just check the chat. I mean, I'm not usually very used to just talking. So because this is an orientation session, we can't communicate a lot, but I can see that somebody left a note here. It says, should we have innovation in our point of view for academic research, or just gathering information from different sources and make a meaningful connection? So I think this question, thank you for the question in the chat. This question goes back to, again, the purpose of the writing. Why do we write? Sometimes your supervisors or instructors will ask you to just write a synthesis of other people's ideas. For example, sometimes the whole thing that you're required to write is a literature review. So you are not really required to bring a lot of your own opinions and ideas into that piece of writing, because the nature of that type of writing is mostly reporting. Like you are doing a report on what other people or other researchers have talked about. But in some other pieces, it's absolutely important. I would say generally, if we're doing a research study, or if we're doing a thesis or something like that, we are most of the time required to bring our own point of view. You remember I said that there's a book called They Say, I Say? Those are the two pieces. Yes, you talk about what others have said. That's collecting information from different sources, as you mentioned. And then I say is your point of view based on that, your innovation based on that. And I think that both need to be included. So thank you for the question in the chat. If you have more questions about any of these stuff, the CAC resources, again, I mean, in particular about drafting part, like questions regarding, okay, how should I write good paragraphs? Or how can I write clear sentences? Or how can I create strong connections between my paragraphs? Stuff like that you can find help with at the CAC. In particular, I highlighted our Brightspace site here, which the link to which you can find also in the chat and on the slides, and that includes a lot of resources on the drafting part. Okay, so we talked very briefly about planning and drafting. Let's close the session by talking finally a little bit about revising, the final 40%. Nobody mentioned revising, though, in the chat. I just want to go back to the chat. When you were talking about the process, people talked about many things: reading, research, planning, writing, data collection, analysis, discussion, data collection, deciding, but nobody mentioned revising. I'm curious. Don't you do revisions when you, like, once you finish a paper, and how do you do that? Do you have any quick experiences or things that you want to share in the chat? Somebody sent with a mentor. I think that's very important. Yes, I think the revisions, the best of the time, in the best of the strategies is to use the guidance of someone else. The CAC can be that for the writing part, your instructors and supervisors would be for the content part. But what do you do? Is it just like reading through it and finding things that need to be improved? Like if you're reading through a paper you wrote, what are you looking for? Are you looking for spelling issues, punctuation, like a comma, or are you looking for bigger things, like whether your paragraphs are working well together? You do both at the same time. Clarity, somebody mentioned clarity in the chat. You're looking for clarity. What I'm saying, like, there are different things that we can be looking for while revising. It could be clarity. It could be, somebody says, is it easy to read? That's, again, clarity, sentence level. Coherence, somebody mentioned coherence. That's kind of on a different level than clarity, isn't it? Clarity is about sentences, mostly. But coherence is about what we talked about, the research question. Is there a central research question? Does everything go back to that thesis statement? That's kind of a bigger question. It's a structural question. Somebody wrote down to tell a story. Is it telling a story or not? Again, that's a structural question. So what I'm saying is there are different things to look at while revising. And my suggestion is don't do all of those things at the same time. Focusing on the big things first is my main suggestion for you for revision. And what do I say when I say big things? Obviously, you need to know what those quote unquote things are, right? What are those writing issues or concerns we have to look at? I think there's a hierarchy, and knowing that hierarchy is important. I usually show students a triangle like this that lists different writing issues. At the bottom, you will see that we have the most fundamental, important, basic things like whether your writing is following the purpose. Like somebody asked, should I be adding my own point of view or not? Those are things that we have to check with the assignment instruction or with the criteria for the writing that we are doing to see if we are meeting the purpose and the expectations, whether our main claims are clear, whether we have written in a level that aligned with our audience. Those are big questions. And I don't recommend mixing those with questions about grammar or word choice or punctuation. So my best strategy or my main strategy here is think about different writing issues from maybe more basic, more fundamental to more superficial. Here it says from more important to less important. In a way, yes, like spelling is less important than organization. All right. But think about the hierarchy, know that hierarchy of the writing concerns, and then edit in rounds, right? You're editing or you're revising. I don't think it should happen all at once. My suggestion is to go at one step doing the basic thing, whether I am meeting the objectives of the requirements of the paper, my claims are clear, whether I'm writing at a level that is relevant to my audience. And then another time you can do a quick read and make sure that the organization is good. Somebody said coherence. So you will be looking for whether all the paragraphs are in a good order, the sections are in a good order, the connections are done well, the development of each paragraph, like each paragraph on the paragraph level, is it following a main idea, or is the paragraph sort of like faulty in its structure and it needs restructuring? And then finally, one round could be on the sentence level. So the clarity of your sentences, the correctness of the sentences from a grammar point of view, punctuation, word choice, and spelling. So that's my suggestion, to edit and round. And then finally, to strategize your revisions. Let's review some of these points. Revise more than once. Know the hierarchy of the writing concerns. Revise in different rounds, starting from higher order writing issues. I mean, in my triangle, they were the base, but we also call them higher order, things like purpose, thesis, audience. And then move your way or work your way towards lower order issues, things on the sentence level, like structures of the sentences, grammar, and so on and so forth. And also take some time out. I think it's a good idea to not to go into revisions immediately after you finish writing. Taking some space between when you wrote it and when you're revising will allow you to see some of those issues better. Somebody mentioned a mentor. That's another way of sort of opening your eyes to things that you normally wouldn't see. You see, like when you write a paper, you're so immersed in it for so long that you stop seeing if there are any issues with it. So fresh pair of eyes, like a mentor, or taking some time, or even using a different medium. I always recommend students like printing it out and taking it out, like sitting by the quad or somewhere outside and looking at it again from a different perspective can be helpful. I also suggest reading it out loud and slowly so you can hear how it sounds, whether it's clear, whether somebody else listening to or reading it would understand it or not. And also make a self-editing checklist. I talked about different writing things that you have to pay attention to. I mentioned organization, I mentioned claims, I mentioned punctuation, whatever. In order not to forget what are the things that you have to be checking for, think of it as sort of a quality control process. and make a checklist. And I can talk about that later if you're interested. Again, all of these things we can talk more about in more detail. I don't want to go on too long because it's just like me talking to a screen. And also for people who are watching it later, it's just a recording. It doesn't include a lot of interaction. Therefore, I invite you to come back later if you are interested to the CAC. It's your home. It's open to all of you, a free service for all students. Just another reminder, you can get different types of help from us. The main one is one-on-one writing appointments that you can book every day. And one-on-one writing appointment, like you are working with a tutor one-on-one, bring your writing or questions and work with somebody for about half an hour. The appointments are about half an hour. You can book 2 of those for about an hour. You can get written feedback. If you don't want to be present in the session, you can just submit your writing, ask a bunch of questions, and then somebody will send you back with comments, or you can meet in person in the library or online in Zoom. In order to book those appointments, you could go to the link in yellow at the bottom of the screen, and it will take you to our online booking system, which is this one. It looks like this. It will require you to register for an account first. Obviously, again, it's just a free account that you will create, and then you can choose the schedule that you want to go in. Do I want to go into online schedule or written feedback or whatever, and then log in, and then you will see the calendar. You will see the openings. So what you see at the bottom, like the white boxes are available. So you can just click on it. It's a free appointment slot to book. And then there are Zoom links for the different people that you work with. It's a little bit small, so you might not see it, but on the left-hand side, you can see the name of the person that you will be working with. So you can book your appointment based on the availability and the time of your preferred instructors or writing specialists. And finally, if you want to find us in person, like I said, we are in the library, the McPherson Library, on the first floor at the Learning Commons Hall. It's a picture of where we are located. But again, to see us or to get in touch with us, I would say the first thing is to go on our booking site for appointments, and also for resources and information, go on our website. The Brightspace sites that I mentioned will be a repository of more resources, wider and more varied. And yeah, that's all. I want to leave some time at the end for questions and answers, but before I end, let's go back to our learning outcomes and see if you actually were able to reach these outcomes. Did I do a good job? Did we do a good job together? Can we say that now you are able to identify 5 main qualities of academic research? You can review that in your own heads. That it has to answer questions that are specific, original, and significant, and it's part of a scholarly conversation. And also the 5 main qualities of the writing, that it has to have a central thesis, it has to support it with documented evidence, it has specific sections that are discipline specific, it has to be structured clearly, and it should use clear and concise language above anything else. And then the last learning outcome was to learn about the 3 stages of writing. I'm sure you remember that one as well, because that was the last thing we talked about. The planning, the drafting, and the revising happening in a sort of a circular mode. And then, as I said, you could think about how much time you want to dedicate to that based on the requirements for the paper that you're writing. We can help you strategize for that as well. You can just come to us without having any particular draft. You just come in and say, hey, I've been given this assignment, or I've been given this writing task, and let's sit down together and see how the process can start. Okay, come with a blank page piece of paper. And finally, how the CAC can help. I talked about our one-on-one appointments, our workshops, learn about sessions, online resources. You can go back to these slides, guys, and see more information about it. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. It's not easy to sit for about an hour and just listen to someone just, going on. So I appreciate it very much. Again, my name is Kaveh. That's my email address. You can reach out to me for any questions or if you want to book an appointment. Also, the CAC general account, the manager account. Her name is Nancy, by the way, the manager, one of the nicest people that I have met in my life. CAC website and the Brightspace site. Again, at the end, I want to also thank the global community and the International Center for Students who give us this opportunity to come and talk to you all. And I will be here after probably we stop the recording, and I will be here in case you have any questions or want to have a discussion. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaveh, for such an informative session. I also learned a lot from you personally. Okay, I'm gonna quickly stop recording.